Okay, fantastic. Thanks so much, Annetta, and thanks so much, everybody, for your introductions, for joining, and for hearing a little bit about your days. Productive, awesome, good, yay. Scattered, you know what? It happens to all of us. So this will be your focusing moment, okay? So Eric actually had the next slide up previously, which is talking about the flow for today. So hopefully there will be a nice flow. As usual, we've got a two-part agenda. The first part, and it's a very full agenda, that's for sure. Hi, whoever just joined. Wonderful, welcome. So the first part is on this new hub, what's called a project management tool that's under development. We'll spend about 20 minutes on that. And that's something that is in direct response to the needs assessment. So I'll describe that in a little bit more detail as we get into that item. Okay, there we go. People may be having a hard time hearing me right now. Anybody who's just joined, could you possibly go on mute, please? Wonderful, all right. And the second part of the webinar is one of our co-design sessions again. We've done some of these in the past, hopefully about 40 minutes on that. And on the topic of public announcements from the project in the hub. And late breaking news, literally within the last 20 minutes I heard this, is that there still may be a ministerial announcement on this from the federal government. So we'll pick up on that in the part 2 of the webinar. All right. Was there anything else there? I don't think so. So I think what we'll do is we'll move right into part 1 of the webinar, and this is on the project management tool. So the hub sent out the notice in advance of the webinar today this morning, which, yes, it had a lot of attachments, and the intention wasn't that you'd go through all of that, but we wanted you to at least have access to this so-called project management tool. I will actually share my screen and bring it up for you. And let's see. Yes, so one of the things I want to mention about this as well is that we do have a guest on another member of the Hub team, a guest on this webinar, which is Dr. Carol Adair. And you hopefully would have seen, there's Carol waving if you can see her video. Hopefully you know a little bit about Carol already from either the Hub's website. There's a really nice bio of Carol there. And also, we put a spotlight on Carol in the most recent Hub monthly update, so in June. And we're delighted to have Carol join us. She's on this part of the webinar because she was very involved in the needs assessment with the Hub. And so we wanted to both acknowledge her contribution. Mute! Awesome. So welcome to Carol, and you will hear a few words from Carol later, a little bit later, when just in providing a little bit of commentary on the project management tool. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen. This will stop other, yes, I do want to continue. And I'm going to do, none of you need to hear my inner dialogue, do you? Well, I'll just share the screen. So this is sort of the tool that you would have received this morning. And I mean, really important if you've taken a look at this too. I mean, I hope it wasn't a response like, oh my gosh, delete, close, abort, abandoned, because, you know, we totally get it. This is a very comprehensive tool. And so the reason we wanted to introduce it today, and we'll simply be doing a brief introduction of it, is so that it's kind of orienting mindsets to how this might be useful for any and all projects wherever you happen to be at. And that's part of the reason for how comprehensive it is. This tool is actually a direct result of the needs assessment. So you've all heard about that. There's a little bit more in this opening paragraph about the tool, but it is a direct result of the needs assessment. And everything about that needs assessment was basically to say, how can the hub best support, the projects in both, advancing or informing projects, the new knowledge development component, and with one very, very important sort of vision in mind, and that's about optimizing child and youth mental health promotion in Canada. And that may sound very lofty and so on, but it's a really important anchor. And what we mean by that, again, not something new for any of you, but mental health promotion that's evidence-informed, sensitive to diverse contexts and cultures, equitable and sustainable. And so that's really an anchor for everything that we're trying to support from a hub perspective. So what we found, a really clear finding, which is not surprising, we expected it, but it's an important part of why this tool is in the shape it is that every single project, you're all finding your sort of commonalities and shared interests, but each and every one of you is at a very different stage of development. And in addition, focusing on such a wide range of issues that relate to project design, implementation, evaluation and research, scaling up. And these, as again, we all know, they are not linear stages. There's not, moving from, okay, design, done. Now we're moving implementation, done, right? So it's not a lockstep linear process. There's a lot of back and forth between them. And the next part of this sort of framing, especially under constantly changing conditions. Those of you who were on the developmental evaluation webinar will remember this language as well. Constantly changing conditions, the complexity that's just layered within the projects and environments. And of course, what's the most abrupt and extreme example recently? Of course, the pandemic. And that's something we've been talking a lot about in terms of how each of you is evolving with new ways of doing things that many of us never thought would be possible, but those so-called pandemic pivots. So that's all sort of background to say, all right, from what we learned, this is one tool, what we didn't really know, that there's no perfect title, but at this point we're provisionally calling it a project management tool. It was born because it's something that, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure in some ways. And no way would anybody be looking at the whole tool at one moment in time. It would be saying, you know what? We're grappling with something related to project design. There's a certain topic within it. And hey, there's a few questions that are food for thought on how we might approach that. So, the tool is comprehensive, but it can be used, is intended to be used in really bite-sized components. Okay, so if you read on a little bit, you'll see, yes, we are inviting that each of you maybe use parts of the tool, etc. I'll get into that a little bit later. So just to give you, again, a little bit of that overview of sort of how the tool is constructed. And again, instead of that reaction like, oh, holy cow, way too much. I mean, we're all about baby steps and sort of, incrementally moving through this stuff. At some times, it is important to kind of, we also think a lot about short-term actions in the context of a longer-term vision, or kind of the, the baby steps in the context of the longer journey. This tool is the longer journey, all parts of it, but then each of the individual topics. So the different categories, you'll see project design, project implementation, evaluation and research, scaling up. You might be thinking, oh yeah, right, Riley, thanks. Like 5 years down the road, we might be scaling up. But actually, that, of course, needs to be thought about from the outset. How do we prime ourselves? If that's our vision, how are we going to start moving towards that? So the way this tool is constructed, it has those broad categories, and then lots, a few different main topics, again, that really emerge from the needs assessment as important for all projects to be thinking about at different moments. So things like having a shared understanding about the problem that is being addressed. How do we really understand and know our different populations or audiences? What are the relevant contexts that we need to consider? How do we think about what kind of intervention approach? So these are all different topics within the broad category, and then the considerations column is like a food for thought. I mean, again, these are sort of questions that are of course, evidence informed. They also address a number of questions that seem to be important for all projects to be considering. Again, just those, did we think about this? And, so less of a formal checklist, but considerations, food for thought in each one of these topic areas. So, and then within those, again, not going through as a point by point checklist, but hey, considering this topic area, let's say it is understanding of the problem that the project is aiming to address, from these different questions or food for thought, these considerations that are there, what is it that we're addressing very well? What are some possible areas for improvement? So it really is that kind of just stimulating thinking. And so as you can see, for any of you, there may only be, a very small subset of topics that are highly relevant at any moment in time. And so that's what I mean by sort of the baby steps in using the tool. So I won't belabor sort of the examples. As you can see, yep, it's comprehensive. There's lots of questions all the way through to scaling up. And as I say, yet the intention is to choose your adventure at a particular moment in time that might be useful. Nothing prescriptive, just a little bit of a tool that can aid in some reflection on things that are important to consider for your projects. So, yes, so I would say, that's sort of a basic intro on this. I wonder, Carol, whether I might pass the floor over to you briefly, just any, from your perspective, for those of you who have seen Carol's bio plus her, the spotlight we put on Carol. Carol actually brings together a really neat combination of, many years of experience in child and youth mental health promotion through to other parts of the continuum as well, and also a very strong research and evaluation background that is very has many strands of community-based work as well. So, Carol, over to you.
Oh, thanks very much, Barb, and hi everyone. It's really nice to meet people virtually and on the phone and so on. Barb's given a really good introduction to this comprehensive set of considerations that you may or may not use for your projects. I just wanted to give you like sort of 3 more concrete examples that are pulled out of this so you can have a little better feel. And again, they came from things that we observed in looking at each project in terms of the needs assessment. So one example is most projects have paid really, really great attention to encouraging participation of important subgroups of their target population. So obviously in keeping with the priority groups for the initiative, but we noticed that almost none of the projects mentioned the intersectionality of disability with those other kinds of characteristics and how inclusion of persons with disabilities might be ensured or enhanced. So that's kind of one question that can be pulled out for people here. Another issue is we didn't hear very much about attending to possible unintended effects of the intervention. I mean, it's often hard to think about unintended effects when you're thinking about all the potential great benefits, you're going to make a difference to these youth or these parents. But in history, we've had some sobering lessons about some interventions in health promotion in the past, and I could give you a couple of examples of sort of interventions aimed at crime reduction or drug use reduction that have paradoxically had actually the opposite effects of those intended. And one of my graduate students a couple of years ago did a study of the effects of anti-obesity messages that were produced by well-meaning public health departments. I mean, these were public health authorities. They produced these anti-obesity messages and posters and so on. And my student was able to show that these they did not lead to like better lifestyle or more exercise or work. They actually increased symptoms of anxiety and depression. So even having no effect at all can be problematic because resources are consumed. The resources that are consumed by ineffective programs are not available for other purposes. So I think it's just an important consideration in the field. That's one example of something you might give some thought to, which is unintended effects. A third example is thinking about how to include reconciliation approaches in projects, like not just for projects that are specifically focused on Indigenous participants, but for advancing this essential movement of reconciliation for all stakeholders in all projects for all Canadians. So there are some good ideas about that issue that we've found in other initiatives, and some of your projects have aspects of reconciliation that can also be shared with other projects. So it's things like that, even things like how to engage people at the policy level. I mean, so many of our projects are really on the ground in the community with the local stakeholders, but how do we get to government, senior bureaucrats, etc.? And getting to those people is really important in terms of sustainability. So those are some of the examples that are in this tool. And finally, I just want to say that, in my career, I've worked the full spectrum of mental health services research from promotion to treatment, as Barb said. And, it's in this upstream work that I feel the biggest impact for future generations is. And I'm really excited about the impact that will come from this set of really awesome projects. And I'm happy to contribute what I can to that impact.
Thanks so much, Carol. Honestly, I'm so glad that you're able to join today, and hopefully, it's just even a little bit of a personal introduction between you and the project. So awesome! Thanks so much for that. I'm going to get the hook pretty soon now, because I promised that this wasn't going to go on too long. So before I get that, I just wanted to, as you can see on the screen, I've gone back up to just the suggestions. This is the top of page 2 of the tool, the suggestions for using the project management tool. It's a draft. I mean, I envision actually this will be an evergreen kind of tool. I mean, new knowledge is always coming forward, and those of you who choose to use some of the considerations here, you'll say, but did you think about this? And we can certainly adapt this as we go. So just to be clear about, okay, where to from here. Basically, we will have a blog coming out on this that just, again, reiterates some of the framing that I was able to do today, and offers up some suggestions for, how you may choose to use it, just for those, meeting you where you're at this moment in time, considering different types of adaptations. That's a big part of this tool as well. And so the instructions that I've highlighted here are just different ways to use the tool. And we will have, as I say, a blog that'll describe it. Plus, we'll also open an online forum that's specific to the project management tool. And that will invite just, again, they can be really just picking out even one topic and how was your experience in using this tool, or tackling sort of larger sections. So we'll follow up on that. Today was really just to give that orientation to this this new product, and as I say, one that and what Carol reinforced emerged as sort of a natural reference point from a lot of what we explored through the needs assessment, and after learning much more in depth about what each of you is aiming to do, required to do, and pretty exciting bit about, you know, the MHPIF and what we're all trying to do together, accomplishing that vision that, that I started with at the outset here, the evidence-informed, sensitive to diverse cultures and contexts, equitable and sustainable. So with that, I'm going to, I think what we're going to do is we'll actually not open up right now for Q&A. I think we do want to transition to the public announcements. Thanks, Dave. We saw your...
And Jenny also is saying, looks like a really useful tool. Thank you. And Lisa, hope everyone is doing well. I love the project management tool. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Annetta. And so I think what we'll do is, oh, and thank you. She may have signed off already, but thank you, Carol, so much for joining. And now we'll move on to part 2. I'll just do a very brief transition of passing the baton to Lisa, who's going to facilitate the co-design session. This part 2 is about public announcements. My understanding is, our understanding is that all of us can be making any announcement about ourselves, our projects, and in our case, the Hub, as early as July. Now I say that because, and this may not be the most up-to-date information, my understanding is that none of the projects have actually sent announcement plans to, and nothing extensive, even just, you know, provisional bullet points about what you intend to do. The MHPIF team at the Public Health Agency just wanted that heads up about, I mean, the permission is out there to choose when and how to announce ourselves, and that there would be, you know, about a month kind of warning, roughly. Not warning, but just to inform the Public Health Agency. And one of the reasons for that, actually, and this may be new information for some of you, is that there is still the possibility of a ministerial announcement. They're still very interested in that. And if that is to happen, and you know, the Public Health Agency team will keep all of us informed about that, it will happen in early July. Right, so that's just still a possibility, but not a guarantee. And that we don't need to know to be able to discuss what we wanted to today about how we might, when we use the word sort of coordinate, it's not about anything prescriptive. It's not about all of us needing to kind of, you know, join hands and have our announcements at the same time, etc. But it is about thinking strategically and creatively about different audiences, messages, platforms, timing that can actually help to create the greatest reach and impact and positioning of the MHPIF within the broader child and youth mental health promotion system. So framing this more as an opportunity for us to consider, again, nothing to prescribe whatsoever, but just that opportunity to hopefully stimulate a little bit of thinking. Lisa, I think I'm going to turn things over to you, and I think you're going to be introducing you're going to roll with a poll is what I heard.
That's right. There was just a question from Mahmood there, maybe before we get going, just around how will the project announcements look like? I'm not very clear about it. I don't know if you want to speak to that first, Barb.
Sure. So project announcements, again, as I understand it, there is permission, like all projects have permission to consider themselves how they may choose to announce themselves. Now, if indeed it's from the federal government, that would be a programmatic announcement, like for the MHPIF. And then, you know, that would help set the stage for each one of us to, you know, maybe reinforce some of those messages, build on that. So I'm not sure if that helps, but there's no prescribed announcement of what that needs to look like for each individual project. Okay. All right. So there may be other sort of comments or questions that come in about that, but let's, well, you know what? Where do we announce this is the question that comes back. So that's actually going to be part of the conversation about what kinds of platforms we might use, for example, on Twitter, etc. So why don't we sort of move into some of these different aspects of announcement planning? ACEs, okay.
All right. So before we move right into the co-design session, we thought it might be helpful to have a bit of a sense of if and when those on the call are thinking about making a public announcement about their project. And again, this may not be something that you've thought about too much yet, and the intention is not to hold you to any firm plans. We realize that any plans might be very much evolving at this point. So we're really just looking for a bit of a moment in time read on what might be the current thinking of those joining us on the call today. So with that, I'll invite Annetta to post the poll. Annetta, do you? Oh.
Yeah, it's up now. If you don't see the poll, could you please put it in the chat or say it verbally, because we just want to make sure that everybody can see it. So I'll just read the question. It's, when do you intend to make a public announcement about your project? The options are July, August 2020, fall 2020, sometime in 2021, or no plans to make a public announcement. Alors la question c'est, quand avez-vous l'intention de faire une annonce publique sur votre projet? Okay, so if anybody's joining on phone and you want to just shout out your answer if you'd like, please feel free. Okay, and I think people have stopped voting now, so we'll just close and display here. Okay, so there's quite a split 3 ways it looks like. About 33% said July, August 2020. 33% said fall 2020, and 27% have said no plans to make a public announcement. And then one individual, which is 7%, sometime in 2021. And I think there's a comment from Louise, not sure when because it depends on involving COVID-related instructions.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thanks so much for participating, and that's a really great backdrop for us to start with in terms of our discussion today and as we move forward as well. So thank you for that. Eric, do you want to move to the next slide? So we'll move into the co-design part of the webinar now that was described in the backgrounder that you may have seen. It was attached to the meeting invite and also shared this morning. As Barb was mentioning, we know that each project in the Hub will be maybe shaping any plans for their own public announcement, including the timing for that, as we just saw. But the purpose of today's session really is to collectively develop some ideas for how and where we might be able to coordinate our announcements or any positioning as an MHPIF community. So with that purpose in mind, we'll focus on 3 main questions today. That being, who needs to know about the MHPIF, key points that we want to get across as an MHPIF community, and how projects and the Hub might help each other. So for those who joined the webinar back in March to co-design the annual symposium, you'll remember that we used a similar participatory approach. And we'll spend about 7 to 8 minutes on each question and provide some time for you to start out solo, to think about some ideas that you might want to share, and then afterwards sharing and discussing those results with you. So we encourage you to enter in any ideas on behalf of your project, and Barb will also be entering some ideas on behalf of the Hub as well. If anyone would prefer to add their ideas in French, please feel free to do so, and Eric will assist with any translation. And for anyone joining by phone, we'll also pause and seek your input for each question. So Eric has moved on to the next slide. So we'll be using some software called Menti. You may have seen that again in the email this morning. For those joining via computer, the link is on the screen and also in the chat box. So if you want to go ahead and open a web browser on your phone or on your computer, in order to see the questions and also submit your responses. Computer might be preferred in order to be able to see the questions a little bit larger. So the website, as you can see, or for those who are on the phone, is menti, MENTI.com. And the code that you'll need is 57385. So again, hopefully people are making their way on. The website is menti, MENTI.com, and the code is 57385. Okay, so we'll start sharing our screen now so you can see the question online. And if you're online on your computer, you should be able to see the first question. And I can see people are already responding, so that's great. So this first question, which is, who needs to know about the MHPIF? Who do we want to reach? Who do we want to generate awareness, interest, and engagement from? You can submit as many ideas as you want. You may want to submit one at a time and press enter after each one. And we'll give you just a minute to enter those before we share the results. So who needs to know about the MHPIF? And if anyone's having any trouble connecting to Menti or otherwise, please feel free to let us know in chat.
Looks like we have quite a few responses already, Lisa. So if you'd like, I can show the results. But of course, invite anybody to continue to contribute or repeat even anything that's up there. It's helpful for us as well to see any confirmation of what others have submitted.
Yeah, and if other people's ideas spark new ideas for you, you can continue to enter those as well.
Yep. So this batch here is the first few. Looks like we have a couple on target populations of the projects.
Do you want to maybe read them out,
Sure.
so that those on the phone can hear them all?
That sounds great. So I'll just read from left to right. We have the target populations of the projects, the target populations, stakeholders, local service provider networks, organizations and individuals who share interests with the MHPIF projects. So examples being Indigenous organizations, school-based organizations, CAMH, NCCs, the MHCC, our advisory committee and community partners. We also have policymakers and collaborators, parents and researchers, public health units across Canada. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. Main stakeholders involved directly with the intervention, daycares, municipality representatives, local public health officials, schools, school boards, community in which the project is taking place, youth mental health focused organizations such as jack.org and We Matter, youth mental health service providers, key stakeholders, provincial ministries that have a connection to youth and mental health, including education, those who work with youth, so teachers, youth workers, coaches, police, provincial and federal government departments responsible for public mental health policy, youth serving agencies, school boards and school administrators, seen that a couple times now, other potential mental health project funders such as United Ways, community foundations, etc. Existing CY mental health networks, CY being children and youth, communities of practice, advocacy groups for target populations, organizations that connect with parents and caregivers, especially the foster system, those who work with or for the various target populations of the projects. That one again has come up a couple times, it's great. Youth and parents, Indigenous communities, municipal government, provincial government, local governments, school divisions, youth programs. We also have a few examples of organizations, so the Canadian Coalition of Youth Advocates, Senator Moody Child, commissioners across Canada, CMHA, jack.org, provincial ministries involved with mental health and or youth. It's great. Agencies and organizations that deal with mental health issues in the community, people seeking mental health support, system partners, community members being served, parents. It will be all the member and committee for the project. Researchers in mental health and mental health promotion. And lastly, of the 29 responses, NGOs whose mandates are related to mental health promotion.
Wow, this is great. This is a very inclusive list, and it's great to see all this input from people. Clearly, people have been giving some thought to what types of audiences might be most appropriate. So I think, you know, given the time we have today, what might be best is for the Hub to take some of these suggestions away and do a little bit of clustering across all 3 projects. And I think there is lots of clustering that we're seeing here. Joey or anyone else on the phone, is there anything that you wanted to add into this list?
No, I was actually able to get on online with my phone and add my response.
Awesome. Great to hear. All right, wonderful. Is there anything else that anyone else wanted to share? Any audiences they wanted to highlight, or?
I'll just add that this 30th response that was added is regional tables involved with the intervention.
Awesome. Well, now that we've generated some pretty fulsome ideas around audiences that might want to know about the MHPIF, we'll move on to the next question, focused on key messages that we might want to share as an MHPIF community. So you should see the next question in your browser now. So what are some key points we want to get across as an MHPIF community? Again, feel free to enter as many ideas as you'd like. And maybe hit submit after each unique idea as well, so we can separate those out. So we'll give you about a minute here for you to go solo and enter in those ideas.
Maybe in the meantime, I'll read the question out in French as well. And apologies for not doing that for the first one. But en français, quels sont les quelques points saillants que nous aimerions partager en tant que communauté du Fonds d'innovation pour la promotion de la santé mentale? So as you can see in the bottom right, again, we have 12 responses in. In just a minute or just a few seconds, I'll show the results and start reading through. But of course, feel free to continue to contribute. They automatically get added to the bottom of the list, so it's relatively easy to follow the new ones that are added. So maybe I will show some of these results. Okay, so I will just start at the top left again. Promoting positive mental health goes beyond self-care. The MHPIF community is diverse across Canada and eager to build connections with others who share interests in child and youth mental health promotion. Mental Health Promotion Innovation Fund emphasis in child and youth mental health promotion is on equity, upstream determinants of mental health, and systemic supports for mental health promotion. Mental health is an important area of research. The importance of a good start in life to ensure mental health throughout the lifespan. The MHPIF aims to contribute meaningful learning about how to do mental health promotion with diverse populations and in diverse settings in Canada. Mental health exists on a spectrum. That we are working together across the nation, and we'll be highlighting what we think is especially working to the public on a regular basis. Together, the MHPIF and those with shared interests have the strongest voice for child and youth mental health promotion. Mental health care is a collective cultural issue as well as an individual health concern. Mental health promotion needs to be part of the continuum of mental health service plans. building blocks to resiliency from birth to adulthood. Mental health should receive greater attention at the policy level. Socioeconomic, cultural factors affecting public mental health. Mental health interventions depend on the access and active participation of communities as well as professional service providers. The significance of the participation by youth and the community in project activities to result youth community-led actions moving forward. That we will be getting feedback from youth involved in our programs to get a ground level, unvarnished view about the value and any concerns related to the projects. Opportunities to engage, how to find out more, what's in it for them, just a couple more. Everyone can promote healthy child development. That our government continues to believe in providing necessary and diverse mental health supports across the country for children and youth. And lastly, mental health promotion and the tool for Francophones family. And just another one added just now, connect early childhood centers with the mental health clinic. That's awesome. Thanks again for all of your responses here. Are there any that, Lisa, you think we might want to highlight or talk about any early clustering or?
Yeah, again, I think there's some really rich ideas here in terms of where we might be able to focus and both collectively and for individual announcements as well. I guess, I wonder if there's anything that anyone on the call thinks is particularly essential or that stands out as most essential to communicate as part of any coordinated announcement. If there's anything in particular, Eric can pull up any one comment.
One thing that really stands out to me is that I really like that, and I can see it as part of strategic communications is, maybe one key message about the essence of the Mental Health Promotion Innovation Fund. And we see a few different examples on this list, and then some really specific kind of unique aspects of what each and every one of you are doing as projects. So linking those messages about kind of the big picture. This is a broader community, and here's a nugget of what we're doing within this community. I think that's really neat.
Yeah, wonderful. And again, we'll take these away and maybe do some clustering around them as part of a next step and share those back with you as well. So if nobody else has any other comments they'd like to make, I think maybe given the time, we'll move on to our final question. So you should see the new question in the browser. And this was the question around how might projects and the Hub be able to help each other?
Et en français, comment est-ce que les projets et le Carrefour peuvent s'entraider?
So again, we'll give you a minute or so to enter your ideas and any thoughts on how projects and the Hub could help each other with any public announcements or more generally generate interest and engagement. Oh. Hopefully no one else is having issues with Menti and they let Barb back in.
Okay, well, looks like the responses have slowed coming in, so maybe I'll just show what we have so far, and again, feel free to add more if you see fit. And I see Barb entered hers into the chat, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so again, how might projects and the Hub be able to help each other out, especially in regards to the public announcements? So for starters, in the top left, follow each other on social media platforms, share highlights, celebrate success, who is working with the population groups, how the responses are, challenges and successes, sharing a template for public announcements that they have done successfully. By helping to stay focused on regularly collecting and sharing useful evidence about the outcomes, so individually, cohort, community, etc. Sharing highlights of different projects and about their activities, partners, and learnings. Continue to provide support in areas of weakness for projects, maintaining clear lines of communication. And just a couple from the chat, reposting each other's social media accounts, use of consistent hashtags on social media. So for example, we could do one hashtag CYMHP or hashtag MHP innovation to promote the initiative, and also to share distribution lists with each other. It's great.
Put myself on mute. I wonder if anything stands out from this list for folks, anything that you think would be particularly helpful for your project or for the overall coordination. Any ideas that you really like that are here?
I think one of the things that stands out to me on this list is that I think it's a combination of some things that are specific to public announcements and some things are more general. So, you know, for sort of this moment in time as we move towards those of us who will be going public sometime, you know, be it throughout the summer or into the fall, we would select those items that are specific to public announcements.
Thanks, Dave. Have a great day. Okay. Wonderful. Does anyone have any other comments that they want to add at this point? Okay. Well, thanks so much to everyone for active participation in the session today. We've developed some really rich ideas for audiences, key messages, and the start to some ways that we might support one another in any public announcements. And as we said, we'll do some clustering of these and sharing them. And Barb will also speak to some other next steps on this.
Sorry, Lisa, can I just throw one more, actually two more ideas that were shared to me in chat.
Okay.
Those being a coordinated, help with a coordinated announcement to maximize impact, and a template for a communiqué de presse, which would be much like a press release.
Great idea.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So, yeah, so before we move into our closing, are there any other questions related to public announcements that maybe don't relate to the 3 questions that we asked today? Anything else on your minds? Okay, so if nothing else, we'll move into our closing, and I'll pass things back over to Barb.
And there's one more comment coming in from Lisa. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing the results of the votes.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. I mean, those are a couple of pretty meaty topics in one webinar, that's for sure. But again, you know, the time sensitivity of some of this stuff is pretty important. So we want to you know, be mindful of pace and content that we cover at any point. But these two seemed like important ones for today. I'll get into just the brief reminder of next steps. Well, one of them including any confirmation of an announcement, a program announcement from the federal government. You would likely hear that at the same time as us, but that's something that, again, isn't a showstopper for any of us. It would simply be an enhancement and maybe something that we want to pay attention to as it relates to timing, going back to the first poll that Lisa put out there about the timing of when we choose to go public. I actually want to do a review of Menti and see whether it just didn't like my responses and that's why I got booted out. Brian, that would be the case for you too. So let me echo the thanks that Lisa shared to everyone for joining today and contributing. So the follow-up on the project management tool, I mentioned an upcoming blog on that, just to reiterate some of the framing and suggestions for how to use. And then an invitation. I mean, everybody's going to find themselves somewhere on, throughout that tool. So choosing at least one section, as in one topic in a general section, and using those questions, those considerations as food for thought, and sharing your experiences and feedback in an online forum that we also will be posting very shortly. On the public announcements, we actually do have a forum that's live now, the MHPIF Public Announcements online forum. And that will be a place, that is a place for just continuing to share ideas, questions as well. Questions about, we saw some of them in the chat about, wasn't sure about be it timing or how to structure this. I mean, any questions that come up there, it's one that we will pay, we'll pay attention to all of them. But again, the time sensitivity of this is high as all of us can move out and go public and be purposeful about that. So we wanted to create that space where we could all share those ideas. So that's the follow-up. And in addition, of course, what's been shared in chat already, I mean, as always, we'll do an event brief. We'll make this one, we'll do it as quickly as possible following this webinar, and it will have all of the individual responses that were shared. And as Lisa mentioned, with some clustering that hopefully, will be helpful, and we can just continue to share as our ideas and our plans develop, and do that on the online forum. And the Hub will contribute to that as well. In this case, it's like being a 21st project in shaping some of these announcements. So I think that's it for today. Again, thanks so much. And if anyone has any sort of final questions or suggestions for other follow-up, either to unmute yourselves, contribute by phone, or using the chat box before we close down for the day. From the webinar anyway. We don't have to shut down for the whole day. Okay. Well, fantastic. Okay. And hopefully, even part of this with the Menti, just modeling some of or using some of the tools that all of us have access to be able to use online. So wonderful. So thank yous coming in. Terrific. And yes, please do know that very open and to your input and feedback, and just, trying our best to interface in the best way with you on that. So thanks to all. And as always, you'll be hearing from us very shortly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
For now.